Thank you for joining us. It's Thursday, April 17th here in Seoul, and I'm Choi You-sun. We continue our special coverage on the ferry that is capsized off Korea's southwestern coast. A major rescue operation continues on this Thursday evening, a day and a half after a Korean passenger ferry carrying 475 people listed and started to sink. 9 people have been confirmed dead, while 287 others remain unaccounted for. Most on board the Sewol ferry were teenagers, high school students, heading to Korea's southern Jeju Island for a field trip. According to a press briefing led by the securities minister earlier today, 179 people have so far been rescued from the ferry, and no further updates on their status has been given since. 101 of them are currently being treated in 8 different hospitals, and 5 are in critical condition. And let's now go live to our Yurian. She joins us from the Paengmok Harbor in Jindogun County, where search and rescue operations are underway. We know what the search and rescue efforts had halted earlier in the afternoon, Lian, due to poor weather conditions. Any new developments as of now?
Hi, Yusan. Unfortunately, I don't have much developments. It was just only an hour ago when the halted rescue operations here resumed. Now, 7 p.m. in Korea time is a time slot when the tides here at the Paengmok Harbor are not moving in or moving out. That's when the tides are the calmest. Now, the rescue operation team was aiming to use that time slot to put it on full mode to continue on the rescue operation that they were not able to throughout the day. But unfortunately, again, no new development as of now. The weather here has been extremely bad today. The rain continues to fall as I'm speaking right now, and divers went in a total of 12 times this afternoon, but they were not able to get into the vessel, not even once. The waters were extremely murky, only allowing them visibility of only 10 centimeters. The tides were as high as 1.1 meters, and the water temperature was as low as 10 degrees. So even if the divers were able to get into the water, they were not able to stay there any much longer. So the conditions have been extremely bad, and as of now, no new developments. Yusan?
All right, Lian, do keep us updated in our next newscast. That was our Yurian reporting live from Paengmok Harbor in Jindogun County off the coast where the Sewol ferry capsized. And we now go live to our Kwon So-ah, who's at the Jindo Indoor Auditorium down in the coastal city. So-ah, it's been over 35 hours since the vessel began to capsize. This must be a harrowing time for the families of those missing, especially the parents of those high school students. How is the situation there?
Yusun, hundreds of families are gathered here at the Jindo Indoor Auditorium awaiting for any bits of new developments. Now, from time to time, I hear parents crying out for their children and hoping for their loved ones to return safely to them. Now, earlier, I saw a woman screaming out that she received a text message which may have come from her child, and some people even fainted. Around 500 volunteers, including nurses, are helping out, and companies and civic groups like the Red Cross and welfare foundations are supplying families with relief supplies, including food, water, raincoats, and hot packs. Yusun?
And we heard President Park Geun-hye was there to comfort the families of those missing and answer their questions that they might have.
Yes, Yusun. At around 4:20 p.m., President Park arrived at the auditorium to talk with the families and console them. She vowed to help in any possible way and that she called for the utmost effort to the rescue crews. The families had many questions. They were skeptic about the rescuers, saying whenever they went to the site, they did not see the hundreds of divers that were supposed to be there to help. When one became outraged about the fact that the families were learning more about the rescue situations by watching the news, people joined in by shouting angrily. President Park assured them that a television screen would be sent to the auditorium for live observation, and currently I am seeing the monitor has been installed and families are gathered around it. Meanwhile, some families have taken shuttle buses to Paengmok Harbor to watch the search and rescue efforts with their own eyes. The buses are running every hour. And that's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more in an hour. Back to you, Yusun.
All right, thank you, Sewol. That was our Kwon So-ah reporting live from Chindo Indoor Auditorium, where the families of the missing passengers are gathered desperately, waiting for some good news. And for the latest update on the government's efforts to find and bring back all of the 287 people still unaccounted for, we're now joined by our Park Ji-won in the studio. Ji-won?
Hi, Yoo-sun. The government is considering designating this Jeju Island and nearby seawaters as a special disaster zone to provide financial support for the sake of rescue operations and other necessary aid.
Well, a lot of confusion here, but one thing is for sure that the whole nation wants everyone found and returned safely. We're learning of new details on what may have caused this vessel to sink.
Right. It came in about 3 hours ago that it is confirmed by VMS, or Vehicle Monitoring System, that this ferry made an abrupt shift at around 8:48, 4 minutes exactly before 4 minutes before the first report came in, and this could have caused the ferry to list. Due to this, the 180 vehicles and 1,000 tons of cargo on board to shift to one side abruptly, and ultimately leading the ship to capsize very quickly. And this is a provisional finding. It's important to repeat that the investigation into what happened will be continued, and there is still a possibility that the ship might have crashed into submerged reefs or rocks.
Well, some people, in fact, many people seem to be saying that this, if the disaster could have been greatly reduced if appropriate measures were taken at the right time.
Yes, Yoo-sun, unfortunately, human errors are being blamed for causing this tragic accident to be worse than the situation. And we've heard reports that the passengers were told to remain where they were when the ship first encountered trouble, which runs counter to what safety experts advise people to do in such situations. They should have headed for open air. Also, there are reports that the captain of the ferry, identified as 69-year-old Lee Jun-seok, was one of the first to jump into a lifeboat, reportedly the only available lifeboat at the time. He abandoned the sinking ship and hundreds of passengers. Experts say that it's absolutely unacceptable that the captain, who should have remained on board giving directions, abandoned ship along with other crew who also bailed out pretty early. The captain spoke to investigators this morning and said he was truly sorry for the passengers and the victims' families.
정말 죄송하고 면목이 없습니다. 뭐라고 말씀드릴 수 없습니다.
Well, and the new report came in and saying that he wasn't even in the wheelhouse at the moment of crash. And the captain didn't answer questions whether he changed the ship's course or whether he used the only available lifeboat to rescue himself. And according to the nation's Ship Safety Act, the captain has a responsibility to remain on board in the event of trouble until all passengers are safely rescued. Coast Guard officials are currently investigating Lee on charges of manslaughter. And it's also pointed out that this ferry was carrying 46 lifeboats, which was mandated by the law. However, in the footage released of rescue operations, only 1 or 2 rescue boats were spotted, meaning the other 40 plus were not even deployed. And some reports say the boats were tied to the ferry by a chain. Experts think this is all because of the lack of preparedness and training, which all boils down to human error.
Well, as we continue to look for and hold on to hope for the return of the missing, another one emerged today that possibly some of the missing on the vessel are maybe staying alive from a possible air pocket that's formed inside the vessel. Tell us more about that.
Yes, experts point out that the vessel has not completely submerged into the water. As we can see on the footages, there's a tip of the vessel is still on the surface, meaning that there could be a giant air pocket there, an air pocket that survivors could be using to breathe and stay alive. And local media reports have been talking about a case out of Nigeria last year where a fisherman survived for 60 hours underwater by using such an air pocket until he was safely rescued. So families of survivors all hope and wish that such a miracle might unfold here in the nation as well.
Well, of course, we're all hoping for a miracle at this point. And also reports emerged earlier today that some text messages were sent to parents of the missing overnight.
Right, and that gave some families of the victim hope that their loved ones are still alive, but sadly the messages turned out to be all false, according to the police investigation, which breaks the hearts of parents who held a glimmering hope in the messages. At around midnight last night, some 15 hours after the ship started listing, the messages said they were alive, so which did raise hopes, but now they all turned out to be false. Police say no records of further messages sent since the noon yesterday when the ship almost sank into the water.
All right, Jiwan, thank you for that update. And as our Kwon So-hwa had earlier said, President Park visited the site of the search and rescue operation and also the auditorium where families of the missing desperately wait for some good news. For more details, we now go to our Polly.
President Park Geun-hye arrived at the site of the search and rescue operation off the coast of Chindo on Thursday afternoon. The visit comes a day after the Sewol ferry sank 20 kilometers off Pyeongbuk Island. Upon her arrival at the nearby port, Korea's head of state inspected the area and was briefed on the ongoing rescue efforts carried out by the military and Coast Guard. She said she was very concerned that the rescue efforts were slow, even though so many personnel and equipment were being mobilized. Park told officials that every minute was critical and that the safety of the rescue workers was also a priority. Park later visited the indoor gymnasium where the families of those missing are gathered, taking questions and offering words of support.
가장 지금 힘들고 순간순간이 고통스럽고 애가 타고 미칠 것 같은 이분들한테 먼저 알려드려야 된다 이거죠. 모든 것을 자세하게 좀 알려드리시고 또 현장에서도 아주 모든 각오를 다 하고 그렇게 또 얘기를 했지만 또 원인 규명도 확실하게 할 거고 거기에 대해서 거기에 대해서 엄벌에 처할 겁니다 반드시.
Many angry family members shouted and screamed as Park spoke, demanding answers and venting their frustration over the lack of progress to save their loved ones. Some even attempted to rush the front of the informal debriefing. Others expressed doubt that the government was doing its best to handle the situation and complained of the lack of updates.
이분들에게 신뢰를 받을 수 있도록 앞으로 좀 하여튼 마지막 한 분까지 구조될 수 있도록 최선을 다하겠습니다.
Park also assured the families that they would be immediately informed about the next steps in the rescue operation, which includes inserting oxygen into the ship to give a lifeline to any survivors, and the arrival of the industrial cranes that will pull up to the ship as early as tomorrow. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
As search and rescue teams race against time to find more survivors, they'll be assisted on Friday by the arrival of 3 salvage cranes, which are on their way to the scene as we speak. However, as our Chi Myung-gil reports, it could take months for the ship to be lifted from where it lays.
3 floating cranes are on their way to the accident site to help lift the 6,800-ton Sewol ferry on its side. Salvage efforts will start Friday as soon as the 3,600-ton floating cranes arrive from shipyards in Chine and Koje, respectively, both located near Korea's southeastern port city of Busan. 1 crane is expected to arrive in the morning and the other 2 in the afternoon to waters off Jeju Island in the southwestern Jeollanam-do province. However, maritime experts say it may take 2 months for the huge cranes to lift the capsized vessel due to the sheer size and weight of the vessel. There are other factors to take into account as well. The depth of the waters at 37 meters is one such factor. Others include high tidal waves and the fact that the ship, which was loaded with freight and now seawater, could now weigh up to 10,000 tons. Crane engineers say it will take at least 2 weeks to deploy chains around the huge vessel. And once the vessel is lifted to the surface, water will be pumped out slowly, after which time the ferry will be moved to nearby land. Meanwhile, until the cranes arrive, search and rescue operations will continue for anyone who may be still alive. Chi Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
The Sewol ferry is one of Korea's biggest passenger vessels. Some experts suggest the ferry's recent expansion may have weakened its dynamic stability and could be a factor that triggered it to capsize. Kim Min-ji reports on the structure of the liner.
Built in Japan in 1994, the Sewol ferry is one of the biggest liners in Korea. Cheonghae Marine became the owner of the vessel in October 2012 and began operations in Korea in March last year. The vessel's normal travel route was from the western port city of Incheon to the resort island of Jeju, which takes about 13 hours. It is 146 meters long, 22 meters wide, and weighs over 6,800 tons. It has a capacity of 921 passengers, 180 vehicles, and 152 20-foot containers. Comprised of 5 floors, the engine room is located on the first floor, while the second floor is a cargo compartment. The remaining floors are the cabins, while the 5th floor is usually reserved for VIPs. Among the 475 that were on board, more than 350 passengers were designated to the 4th floor, with the majority believed to be students from Danwon High School. There were about 80 passengers on the 4th floor, which is also equipped with a restaurant, information desk, karaoke room, and convenience store. Fears have grown that many of those unaccounted for could be trapped inside their cabins or in other areas and have died. However, there is still hope that some will be found alive, which would be possible if they were using a giant air pocket to breathe, as the tip of the ship is still above the surface. Meanwhile, in a separate development, Seoul's YTM reports that the vessel only had the capacity to carry 804 people in Japan, but was expanded when it came to Korea. If we compare the two, there is a difference in the height of the liner. The deck has been transformed into cabins, allowing it to carry 117 more passengers, while the mass of the vessel also increased by 239 tons. The expansion of the ship is now also being looked into as another possible cause for the accident. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
The 475 people on board the Sewol ferry should be on Jeju Island right now. They left from the port of Incheon Tuesday night and were nearly 12 hours into their trip when something caused the ship to capsize. Shin Se-min walks us through the ferry's journey leading up to the fateful moment.
11 hours and 52 minutes. That is how long the capsized Korean ferry sailed after departing from its port on Tuesday night before it suddenly ran into problems. Its 475 passengers expected to set off at 6:30 p.m. that night, but their departure is delayed 2 hours due to foggy weather skirting near the coastal area.
We were told the thick fog would delay our departure time.
There are no indications of any trouble after the ferry hit open waters. And around 10 p.m. Tuesday, the ship passed by Palmi-do Island, slipping through the Incheon coastal waters, heading south toward Jeju Island. By dawn, the Sewol ferry passes near waters off Mokpo near Jeollanam-do province. 8:30 in the morning. Excited students wake up to thoughts of their field trip to Jeju. Many either call or text family members about their whereabouts and to tell them they are safe. But 20 minutes later, with just 2 hours to go before the ship is set to arrive at port, the ship comes to an abrupt stop and begins to capsize. The students and others on board would be in Jeju right now, if not for whatever caused the ship to sink. Yet, a majority of them remain missing at this hour, with a massive search and rescue operation underway to find them. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Heart-wrenching text messages sent by students stuck in the capsized ferry have emerged. In one text, a student writes of despair in the face of certain doom. And in other, students exchange words of love as they fear time might be running out. Our Connie Lee has the details.
At the time the ferry was sinking, students trapped inside the vessel sent text messages
and most of them reveal fears that they might not make it out alive. Students telling each other "I love you" are seen throughout the exchange in one chat room. One student even writes, "I think we're going to die," showing feelings of hopelessness as a ship was tilting. In another chat room of students, one passenger writes, "If I ever hurt you, please forgive me," and then ends with "I love you." It has yet to be confirmed whether the students who sent these messages have survived. Now an exchange between students and a teacher. The students ask if the teacher is okay and if he or she is wearing a life vest. The teacher responds with exclamation points, "Yes," and tries to reassure the students, telling them to stay where they were and to put on a life vest if they can. The conversation ends with words that possibly show a loss of hope among those on the ship. They all tell each other "I love you," which may prove to be the last messages they'll ever send. A video taken by a cell phone also reveals students staying put inside the ferry when it started to capsize. And stories from survivors show desperate attempts to live, with some passengers breaking through windows and jumping into the ocean to be rescued.
I just jumped into the water and started swimming. It was really cold, so I tried to swim as fast as I could.
When the ship was completely listed, the water just rushed in. The water really came up to my face, not giving me any time to think.
But he was one of the lucky ones who actually came out of this disaster alive. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Stories are emerging about what happened on the ship as it was listing, and many of them include acts of heroism. Stories of selfless people who risked their own lives to save others without a moment's hesitation. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Amid the chaos of one of the worst ferry disasters in South Korean history, stories of heroism are ringing through the hearts of the public. Female crew member Park Ji-young, who was found dead on Wednesday, remained calm when she ran out of life vests on the third floor and hurried upstairs to grab more for the panicked students. When one student asked her why she was not wearing a life vest, she said crew members would be the last to leave the vessel and that she would leave after everyone was safe. The 22-year-old, who tried to save lives even when the cold seawater came up to her chest, lived with her mother and a younger sister. High school student Jung Cha-eung did not give a second thought to taking off his life vest for a friend. He was killed after throwing himself off the ship to save another of his friends. Known as a friendly and caring person, Chung had always dreamed of majoring in physical education in college. 58-year-old Kim Hong-kyung saved 20 passengers by himself as the ferry was sinking. Kim reportedly tied a fire hose to curtains and pulled nearly 24 students from the first floor of the ship to the outside so that rescue helicopters could reach them. And another story of heroism is the rescue of a 6-year-old child. The young girl named Kwon Ji-yeon was rescued by 4 passengers, as you can see in this video in the final moments. During the disaster, she was apparently split up from her parents and brother, who are unfortunately still among the hundreds that remain missing. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Bad weather interrupted search and rescue operations at Jindo on this Thursday. For details, we connect live to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, give us the details.
Well, Yoo-sun, nature is not cooperating with us. Harsh tidal waves along with strong winds and winds is happening at this hour. So things are looking pretty bad, and we all hope that the weather will clear up. But as for now, it's 14 degrees on Jindo, but the temperature of the seas is at 11.1 degrees. About 10 to 40 millimeters of precipitation will fall through later tonight, which will be accompanied by strong winds blowing at around 8 to 12 meters per second. Well, taking a look at the current conditions, the nation will gradually be at the edge of a high pressure front, which is why we are seeing heavy clouds across the map. The rainfall on Jindo will continue through tomorrow morning. As for other parts of the country, most regions are seeing light showers at this hour, which will continue through tomorrow afternoon. On Friday, Sewol peaks at 23 degrees, while Daegu and Gwangju hit the low 20s. Moving on to other regions, Jeju makes it to 17 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang top out at 13 and 9. Back to you, You-sun.
And that's all we have for you at this hour. Stay with us for the latest on the ongoing sunken ferry rescue operation on our next newscast in just about half an hour.